morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar presentation for the love of nurses, the 4 C's of wellness, courage, connection, care, and compassion. My name is Dr. Sarah Carsley, and I am an applied public health science specialist at Public Health Ontario, and I have the pleasure of co-moderating today's session. Before we begin with today's presentation, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm currently on here in Toronto is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Also, today is December 6th. It has been over 30 years since the murder of 14 young women at Polytechnique Montréal. This act of violent misogyny shook our country and led Parliament to designate December 6th as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. Today, we remember the lives of these 14 young women, and as we mourn their loss and reaffirm our commitment to fight the hatred that led to this tragedy. It is also a time to take action. Achieving a Canada free from gender-based violence requires everyone living in this country to educate themselves and their families and communities on gender-based violence, center the voices of survivors in our actions, and speak up against the harmful behaviors. Before we begin today's presentation, I'll mention a few housekeeping items, and then I'll hand it over to my co-moderator. The chat pod is currently disabled, but we will be enabling it for the latter part of the presentation to encourage interactivity and to promote live feedback. It is still encouraged to use the Q&A pod if you have questions during the session. A discussion and question period will follow the presentation. And if at any point during the session you experience any technical issues, please email capacitybuilding@oahpp.ca. I would now like to introduce my co-moderator for today's session, Dr. Susan Jack. Dr. Jack is a professor in the School of Nursing at McMaster University. She has worked in public health for over 26 years in a variety of roles: public health nurse, nurse manager, educator, and researcher. She is also the lead of the Public Health Nursing Practice Research and Education Program. Over to you, Susan.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah. Good morning to everyone. So wonderful to see so many of my colleagues from joining across Ontario, as well as those of you who are joining from across the country. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Susan Jack. I'm a professor at the School of Nursing, and for several months this year, I was so grateful to Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health Unit for allowing me to come back as a public health nurse to support the vaccine clinics. It felt so good to come back to my roots of nursing and to remember why I had become a nurse. Now, in my everyday work, I do research on nurse home visiting, and it is really one of my greatest joys is to promote and think carefully about the important work that all of you do as public health nurses, and to think about the work and promote the work that public health nurses and family home visitors do in home visiting. So today is our inaugural PHN-PREP webinar. It is our goal to have a series of webinars over the next week to start to develop cultures of wellness and really to advance the practice of home visiting. And this work is only possible with the support of our colleagues at the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. And it's such a pleasure to be collaborating with Public Health Ontario, who's provided incredible support to launch today's webinar. Now, as we can all appreciate, right now is a time of constant change and increased complexity. Our research and our evaluations of the Healthy Baby, Healthy Children teams in Ontario is showing us that there's some common experiences across all of the programs. And what that is that your teams are fundamentally different. There are the seasoned nurses who throughout the pandemic have stayed with the home visiting program. Many of the programs also kept their family home visitors. But within those same teams, many of the family home visitors went to work with the COVID-19 response, as well as many of the public health nurses changed programs. Now what we're seeing is the teams are hiring new nurses. Teams are returning, or nurses are returning to the programs, and the programs, the home visiting programs themselves have changed. You changed how you deliver the program. You've had to adapt your services. You're always thinking about your safety and the safety of families. And the complexity of family needs has also increased. And holding this all together is the incredible work of your supervisors and managers who are every day reflecting and thinking about how do they onboard new nurses, how do they support the existing teams, and how do they create space for you to reflect and emotionally refuel as you begin to adapt to the new changes in practice. And so while this is a challenging time, I also think this creates an opportunity for all of us to pause and think about why did we become nurses or home visitors, and what brings us joy in our work? And that's really going to be the goal of today's presentation. And it's really my pleasure to introduce the speaker for today's presentation. And so I'd like to introduce Dr. Lucy Houghton, who is a registered nurse. She's a culture and resilience researcher and a board-certified wellness coach. She holds multiple bachelor's degrees in biology, exercise science, and nursing, a master's degree in sports medicine, and a PhD in organizational leadership, health, and human performance. And she spent the last 20 years working in healthcare and emergency services, post-anesthesia, sports medicine, and developing rural and country community health. Her research focuses on developing strategies to mitigate burnout, loneliness, and organizational trauma through holistic resilience, courage cultivation, and emotional competency. And so I hope all of you will join me in welcoming Lucy today. And Lucy, over to you. I'll remove my slides and allow you to put yours up. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful welcome. It was very inspiring and touching, and I appreciate your kind words. I am going to share my screen, share my world with y'all. I am so excited to be here this morning with everyone, and I just want to check in with our folks real quick and make sure my slides are up. We're good.
Yeah, it looks great.
Awesome. Yay. So I think to level set and get us started, I always like to just talk about what success looks like for us today as we're here. And so a couple of things for us in terms of success. So success for us today will look like an increased awareness potentially around the importance of burnout prevention, an increased desire to commit to one practice. So if you find one practice in here today that you think, I really want to give that a try, that's eureka for us. And then gaining knowledge around practical ways to support your wellness. And not just your wellness. If you are a manager or a leader, then what that can look like for your teams as well. And I do want to mention, for those managers and leaders, we do have a guide for you after this that gives some tips and tricks around how you can incorporate this work into your teams. So in order for us to get started in talking about all of the things that come around, reigniting our passion and our joy, and we have to talk about what happens to it, or how does it get lost, and recognizing the space that we're in terms of healthcare, and so taking a peek into that. And so the first thing I like to talk about is this window of tolerance in our autonomic nervous system. So if we go back to our theory classes and think about our anatomy classes, and we look at the nervous system, then we might remember that there's this window of tolerance. And so this is that calm zone where we can perceive information, we process it, and then we respond instead of react. But there are times for us, and the more as you'll see, the more compact things become, the smaller that window gets. And that can lead us to these places of reaction. And so looking at, how our organizations are really set up and how we can help to broaden that window or even make it bigger so that we can all perceive, process, and respond from a place where we want to be. So what happens? How do we, how does our window shrink? And recognizing that that is, simplifying things in quite a bit, but just to give us a framework of how to talk about that. The essentials of it is we get really comfortable with hard things in healthcare, right? In nursing, we see folks in struggle, in pain, experiencing tragedy. And we get comfortable in so much so that we just know that that's how our work is. It's what our work looks like. And when that happens, there's this very human response that occurs. When we get comfortable with those hard things, we can start kind of dress rehearsing them. And so I would just like to acknowledge that if healthcare were easy, nurses wouldn't be needed, right? If these were things that weren't complex and difficult, then healthcare probably wouldn't be an industry. But that's not the case. Humans are complex, and so the things that we need help with in terms of our healthcare are also very complex. I would say that I used to think that was really just around healthcare, and I've come to recognize, of course, that is just not the case. That was simply my lens. If you are working in human services of any kind, those same experiences exist. And so we get really comfortable with these hard things around the complexity of being human, so much so that we start to expect and anticipate the conflict, the anxiety, discomfort, frustration that can come along with working with hard issues. And so then what? The natural human response is to start withdrawing, to numb that discomfort. And that can show up in lots of ways that we might not recognize at first, but I bet you could think of times where that may have happened for you, or you've seen it in others. I think a lot of times it can be easier to see there, but these things can show up in many different ways. Maybe it shows up by spending a little extra time on social media, just kind of scrolling the feed. Or maybe it looks like binge watching your favorite TV show. I will tell you, as I started to kind of disconnect and become burnt out when I was working in emergency, that my go-to was binge watching The Tudors, which kind of dates when I was having that experience. But it was just like, next episode, because I really didn't want to be in that space of thinking about what that shift was just like. We might see covering up mistakes, blaming, gossiping, bullying. We know in nursing that can be, something that's difficult because we're kind of in that pressure system of above and between our patients and sometimes our system or other orders that come down. And so kind of trying to juggle the expectations. We might stay quiet where we used to speak up about things that require courage and that are really difficult. We might just start to really pull back, and we might get burnt out. So where we start to really become emotionally exhausted, that emotional exhaustion over time leads to cynicism and also leads to us not being able to grab onto our purpose anymore. We're going to talk about burnout a little bit and what happens there and why do we get there and how it is a very, very human, natural experience, but what we can do about it as well. So things get cluttered up when we put our armor on. When we put on armor, we typically, around our hearts and our minds, we're typically doing that from that place, right, of self-protection, of feeling like I'm going to keep that stuff out because that's hard and it's painful. And so it gets cluttered up with suffering, tragedy. It gets cluttered up with red tape, administrative burden, inefficient processes, electronic medical records, mistakes we don't forgive ourselves for. And so I think about this as like, my happy place in my mind is going to a beautiful beach and just kind of relaxing by the beach and listening to the ocean. And if you think about our hearts and our souls that way, they really become cluttered up with all of these things like our self-judgment, the moral injuries, the vicarious traumas, the perfectionism that sometimes we can bring, that continuous suffering that we have to hold space for. And so one by one, all of that stuff gets piled up inside until we might lose our beautiful selves. And so I think about that place as like a beach. And I think, when I thought about what my heart and soul looked like when I was in, places of burnout, it kind of looked like this, I felt like, of just kind of this place where I didn't even want to be, like, who wanted to hang out there? And so I've heard clinicians describe this in lots of ways. Recently, I've heard things like death by 1,000 cuts or death by 1,000 clicks, right? It's just kind of that soul death and losing ourselves in that place. And so it can become cluttered up. So why does that happen? And, and what is that? What does this lead to for us when we have all of these things and we're not allowing them to come out? Because we think our armor is there to protect us from things getting in, but really all those things get in there, right? And then they can't get out. And so that's really the struggle that we have with that armor. So burnout in 2019, well before the pandemic, was recognized by the World Health Organization as a chronic workplace stress, essentially as a medical syndrome caused by occupational imbalance. And so where we see burnout showing up from that occupational imbalance. And so I just want to really recognize, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, that burnout is essentially an occurrence from this workload imbalance compared to resources. And if you think about resources as not just the physical tools that you have, but also the time that you have to do all of the things that you want to do. So I know for me as a nurse, it never felt like there was enough time to sit with that patient, when I just had to be with them as we told them that they had stage 4 cancer, or that their child had just had their first seizure and we were going to keep them overnight. There was never enough time to sit there with them and help them move through all of those new things that they were dealing with. And so where that imbalance happens, we can start to see things like nearly twice as many patient safety incidents, greater than twice the likelihood of exhibiting poor professionalism, greater than twice the likelihood of having unsatisfied clients as we might guess. And then burnout for us as clinicians. But I suspect this is probably, this is just a thought that it probably looks the same in many other professions as well. But for us in nursing, we see an increased disease, disruptive behavior, divorce, substance abuse, depression, and where those things exist, we can see death by suicide. I can tell you that I've lost 3 of my colleagues where all of those things existed. And I've been in my own experience of burnout and thankfully, had some levels of awareness only from hearing things similar to this and having any kind of awareness around what was going on for me, because we weren't really talking about that in the ER at that time. But that I think the beauty and the thing I really want to share is that burnout it's on a spectrum, the same way we can think of as like our physical health. And so if we think of joyfulness at one end, burnout at the other, it's on a continuum. We might be at different places on that continuum on any given, point in our professional lives. And so when I think about, I wish I would have known, I wish I could have shared with my colleagues. And so now I think, for the love of wellness, for the love of my lost friends, and for the love of each one of you, I want to share some science around the wellness side and what can we do. And if you think about yourself and you think, I've been more emotionally exhausted lately, and I've felt a little less connected to my purpose lately, or I know colleagues who have, then this is for you. And that's the idea here, is to be able to share some ways that I found to move back to my purpose and back to joy, and why I left the bedside and started to become a researcher. And so that, I now help and hope to heal folks who heal folks. And so I've dedicated my life to the love of nurses. So when we think about all that stuff that was packed in there, right? And now burnout could be an experience that if we put armor on and we're keeping all that stuff in, and we think about, but wait, I really want that beautiful beach. How do I get there? Then it's very similar to, the advice we might give our children when we take them into nature, which might be, whatever you pack in, you got to pack out. So if we packed it in, we got to pack it out. If we've made a mistake, then debriefing that mistake and knowing that, I read somewhere that failure often is equated in our minds as shame. And so feeling like we're bad, or we've done something bad. And so really recognizing that failure is the opportunity for creativity. And creativity, especially in healthcare, I think, is so vital to being able to do the very best that we can. And so those opportunities are really very beautiful. And so, how do we work through those things? And how do we give ourselves permission that all of those things that we've packed in can be unpacked and moved through and lead us back to joy? This is that organizational lens that I wanted to just acknowledge. I wanted to acknowledge the importance of organizations and having this conversation around burnout in terms of organizations, that owning that large part of decreasing burnout and creating cultures of joy and climates of joy, that they play a major role here. And so, if we think of burnout as a very natural experience to having this imbalance in the workplace, some recent, and it's been research that's been done over really the past 10 years, but something that I've become aware of most recently, and this is work done from doctors Shanafeld, Swenson, and Noseworthy, out of both came from Stanford and Mayo. What they recognize is that 80% of the burden of burnout belongs to the organization. That's huge. That was huge for me, as I knew that, in my experience, I couldn't wait for my organization to learn that too. And I just had to get started for me. But now working with organizations, it feels so empowering in my mind that organizations are now asking, your organization, or at least in terms of NFP, have asked to do this work. And so I love that, there's some ownership really being taken for what can we do. But we're not victims here, right? We have 20% of that as individuals that we can fully own. And organizations are made up of individuals, just like you and me. And so we're empowered in our own right to be contributors of joyful culture and owners of our own story and our own well-being. And so while organizational design issues that can lead to that imbalance can take time to solve, we don't need to wait to tend to our own well-being. there are many, many, many ways to cultivate joy. So many ways. And where we cultivate joy in organizations, we see this, all of the things that you hope to see. You see this increase in civility, decrease in client attrition, and this increase in our staff satisfaction, increase in our client satisfaction, all of the things that you would hope to see. But we've heard of lots and lots and lots of ways over the last couple of years, especially, to take care of ourselves and to work towards our own well-being and to look at what that might mean for us. But people often ask me, like, what else? And so I use the 4 C's of wellness as a scaffolding to support journeys of wellness and really to start conversations and to hopefully maybe intrigue with a new idea around, oh, I hadn't thought about, or I want to give that a try. And so recognizing that these are starters, and this is a conversation starter, just for us to maybe find one thing, right, that we didn't know or we were reminded of that can help us. And to get started, I'd like to share a little around courage. So when I started to make that shift from, okay, I'm going to leave the bedside and I'm going to go on this journey of becoming a researcher and seeing what could I do? What could I have done for, past me who was in this place of burnout and didn't know it? What could I have done? And so I like to start with talking about courage because that's where I started in terms of my research. And I did it for this reason. I did it for the reason that it took a lot of courage for me to say, I'm feeling emotionally exhausted, because that really wasn't okay in our culture, in the emergency culture, to say that you needed help, or that maybe you wanted to bounce some ideas off of somebody around your well-being. That was just not okay. And so courage was needed. I think it's really important when we think about courage for us to talk about what courage is not. So courage is not recklessness. It's not fearlessness. It's not complete competency. Courage is this very personal, thoughtful experience of choosing what is right. And really around our wellness, it's what's right for us in the face of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So that it's in the face of vulnerability, right? That's what makes courage courage. It's what makes it kind of that thing that can feel uncomfortable, is because it really requires that we walk right through vulnerability to do what's right for us. I'd also like to share something a little provocative in the outcomes of my research, is that we've been taught, or many people have been taught, and many cultures are taught, that courage is the opposite of courage is cowardice. And I am here to tell you, according to my research and the research of many, many others, that is not the case. That is absolutely not true. The opposite of courage is protection. And let's be honest, choosing to protect ourselves and others from suffering is a very expected human response, and we're designed that way. The problem becomes when we allow it to be our default, because protection comes with a really hefty price of losing ourselves. And so when I consider the research that was out there already, one of the things that I found, I thought it was so beautiful, was Dr. Lopez's research on courage that said, courage is the platform on which all positive mental health rests. And I've taken that a little further to say courage is the platform on which all whole health rests. One of the most important findings in my research is that where we choose courage, it really didn't seem to matter if it went the way we hoped or not. There was a sense of liberation, freedom, and relief from that pressure that we were experiencing. And so in terms of cultivating courage, that was where the research led me, was in the courage cultivation theory. And so I wanted to share just a little bit with you. We can cultivate courage by knowing a few things, by knowing our values, belonging to ourselves first, having a safe space to reflect. And so when you think about that reflective supervision, right, really creating and holding a safe space for reflection. But this can also, this is a very personal thing that I had participants say that I do this in the shower, or sometimes I do this when I'm walking my dog, or I will do those things and think about whatever it is. And then I reach out to my trusted friend and we have a conversation. So they invite people into that reflective space, having a willingness to step through vulnerability and allowing ourselves to not be, right, this master of all things, that recognizing that courage is not full competency. It is a learning and an inquiry and being curious. And so here's one way, or a few ways, not just one, here's a few ways that we could get started. So cultivation of courage requires a commitment to practice. And here's some ways that you could practice. And I'm going to pull my chat. I'll move it off the screen here. Pull the chat up. Okay. So from here on, where I might ask you to put things into the chat. And when you do, please make sure that you are keeping that really directed to what we're talking about, so that we can get ideas from each other. So some ways that we can get started around courage is giving permission for what we need, giving ourselves permission, right? And I'll show you a tool for that. Defining what matters most. Remember that courage cultivation starts with knowing our values, what's most important to us. Practicing boundaries. And so this may be, we often think about practicing boundaries as something that happens with others, but it can also be with ourselves. Like, I was thinking about this morning. Honestly, when I woke up, I thought, I want to start practicing boundaries different so that I can be more available to my family. And so my boundary is now going to be, and granted, I've known this for a while, that no cell phones at the dinner table. That dinner table is sacred family time. And so I'm the worst offender, I'm going to be honest. So that's a boundary I'm going to set with myself, is no more cell phone at the dinner table, that's sacred space. Writing an imperfection pledge can be wildly powerful, because it really gives us permission to not feel like we have to be perfect, to not feel like we have to be superheroes. We do heroic things as nurses, but when we think about ourselves or have messages from others that we are, superheroes, then it really takes away our humanity and being able to make those mistakes and have those opportunities for creativity. And so writing an imperfection pledge, or maybe trying something new, something you've never tried before. So my kiddos, they chose things that they wanted to do. One of them wants to go to jujitsu. And I thought, oh my goodness, because my commitment was that I was going to try the new thing with them. So I thought, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to try something new. And then lastly, permission to ask for help. So if help is needed, then asking for that help. And that might be in solving a difficult issue with a client, but that also might be like, I need help carrying this out to my car, or, that I need help. Like, I want to go and see my healthcare provider, or whatever. There's so many ways that we can ask for help. I try to commit to asking for help around simple things, just because of the next C that we're going to look at, which is connection. So one of the things I can ask for help of is sometimes things are a little too high for me. And so I asked my husband, could you help me get that thing down? And just this grin that comes on his face when I have asked for help is a pretty big deal. And I see, could I give an example of writing an imperfection pledge? Yes. So I have one right behind me. It says, I am grateful that I have enough and I am enough. And so recognizing that I'm not going, there's nothing to wait for. I'm not enough in the future when I have, done all of these things that I think I should do. When I've lost the weight I think I should lose, or when I have ran the marathon that I thought I should run, or any of those things, right? That it's today, right now. I'm enough, just right now. And so imperfection pledges like that, but it can look however you would like it to look. So whatever you're needing permission for. Courage starter. So a way to get started is make yourself a permission slip. Print this one off if you download the PDF of the slides and you like this. Feel free. But I would love to see in the chat what you feel compelled to need permission for today. So is it to take a break, to go for a walk, to ask for help, to slow down? Slowing down for 5 minutes significantly boosts our cognitive function, our ability to solve problems, and our ability to extend empathy and compassion with one another. Is it to believe in yourself, or maybe to play, or maybe to put that cell phone away, or to be enough right now? What kind of things do you need permission for right now? And I see that I gave myself permission to turn off all distractions and to be fully engaged in this webinar. Thank you, Jody. To slow down. One thing at a time. Oh, yes. Beautiful. And so just, and feel free to find that chat and put those things in of what does that permission look like today? And if you haven't given it, that's okay. What might you want to give permission for today? Take a break. Yeah, self-care. Beautiful. Better care. More sleep. Ooh. Make me a priority. I love that. Walk outside. We're going to talk about that too. Thank you so much. Yes, it's beautiful. I love it. The next C I'd like to share with you is connection. Connection, if we think about Dr. Brené Brown's work, she says that joy is dependent on our ability to connect with others and to connect fully with our own selves. And specifically our emotional selves. So there was this beautiful book written called Together by Dr. Vivek Murthy. And he talks about that the opposite of connection is loneliness. And this was prior to the pandemic, that loneliness was already being seen at epidemic levels for clinicians, and that it has been shown to be the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I had no idea, but that stopped me in my tracks. I thought, oh my goodness, if we knew that that's what, loneliness was doing, and that, the isolation has just been even more impactful. And so bringing our attention to what can connection look like, and what might we need to do. And so there's 3 main connection points that I'd like you to know about. Connection with your purpose. You might hear a theme here between courage and connection, and they do. All of the C's go hand in hand. They're very interwoven. Connection with your whole self. So not just our physical selves or our mental selves, but also our emotional selves and our spiritual selves, our whole entire existence, right? And we see that as nurses. We know this. We know that that they all affect each other. And so it's the whole picture of ourselves. And I think that, folks here probably know that better than anyone, because you see that every day with your clients as well. And so it's our whole selves. And then connection with others. And that has 3 factors too. And I didn't know this. This was something new for me that I had learned. So there are 3 areas with others that connection is important. One is with our intimate relationships, like our family relationships, our partner relationships. Another is with our friends. So those close people to us where we have trusted relationships that are outside of that family unit. And then our what I describe, or in what has been described anthropologically, as our tribal connection. So not in terms of like indigenous, but in terms of folks that we connect with in this way where we have these very like purpose interests. So tribes for me are examples would be folks who do work around burnout, right? Or you don't have to do work around burnout, just be interested in that and have dialogue and conversation. Also nature work, or experiencing nature and liking to, go out and spend time there. If you think about like what your hobbies are, those are different areas of folks that you can cultivate this connection with. And so helps us to lead to connection around a fuller, more whole self. So when we think around connection, here's some of the research that I found the most impactful around this, that kind of gave me that aha, I get it. This is why this is so important. And that was needed for me. Doing acts of kindness produces the single most reliable momentary increase in well-being of any exercise tested, according to Dr. Martin Seligman out of the University of Pennsylvania. Now, I thought, I could do an act of kindness and I get the single most reliable momentary increase in well-being. I am there. That sounded amazing. And so it's something that I've found that I just love to practice. It's super fun. Relationships serve as health protective factors. So increases our physical and mental well-being, our sleep quality, experiences of happiness and joy, different things. Happiness being momentary, joy being even in moments where happiness is not experienced, still feeling, in concert with oneself, and our ability to heal. And as a nurse, I will say, I used to work in a rehabilitation center for cardiac and stroke patients. And this was so evident, though I didn't really know what I was seeing, it was so evident that where social connections, healthy social connections existed, that folks healed faster. And then social connections themselves are the greatest predictor of long-term joy and happiness, according to a long Harvard study that was done on that science. Okay. So just to reiterate, those building connection points for ourselves is with our purpose, with ourself, and with our communities. And if you're thinking around like, gosh, Lucy, I'm a nurse. I love being a nurse, but I'm not sure if my purpose is super clear. What could I do? I would say one of the places that I have folks start right out of the gate is just doing a strength and values exercise to look at really what's most important to you. And that typically will help lead to those ideas. And then, we would look at ideas around like, what are the places where you found the most joy in your life, and look at what those things are. And so for me, the trend that I can see throughout my entire life is that I love to help others become their very best selves. And so everything I've ever done, I can see that trend through there, and it just lights me on fire. Here are some connection starters. So debriefing with a trusted colleague, performing an act of kindness, like we talked about, sending a gratitude text, completing a Find the Why exercise, like I was just describing, having a monthly luncheon with your colleagues, even if it's virtual, that's okay. Calling a friend that maybe you haven't spoken to in a while, and connecting with them, and then connecting with your core values. So I think we should try this together. Let's try a connection exercise right now. Now, this will require your cell phone. And so if you don't have your cell phone right now, that's okay, because I know some of us may have been so beautiful and put that cell phone away and given yourself permission for that. And that's all right. Let's honor that practice. But we're going to try this. And so I want you to put into the chat and tell me, give me your real feedback here. So I want you to think about the names of people who you would call at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning if you were having a hard time and needed help. So think about those names, tick them off, how many, and type that number in the chat. Let me see. 3, 2, 3, 4, 3. Yeah. So very, consistent, pretty consistent around 2, 3, and 4. And I will tell you that the average is 2 to 3. And I see some are larger, some are smaller, right? And there's no right answer here. There's just an average of 2 to 3. Now think about this other question. Think of who you would want to call you at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. if they were having a hard time. So who on your list of people can you think of, of all the people that are in your life, how many would you want to call you? I see 20, anyone, over 10, any of them, all of them, most all of that, yes, right, 25, 10 plus. The numbers are way bigger, right? And so why is that? Why do we think that we cannot reach out and we want others to reach out? Guess what? Those folks that you want to call you, they feel the same way. They're putting 2s and 3s also. This question has been asked hundreds of times, and the average is 2 to 3. And so most likely, that won't change unless we let the folks in our tribe know how much we appreciate them and how much they mean to us, and that they can reach out to help from us. And it makes us more available and more able to connect with them as well. I've done this every time I give this talk and we do this exercise. And I've always been so pleasantly surprised by the response I get back. So let's get our cell phones out and consider typing this. I'm attending a talk right now. You can speak it right into your phone if you want to. We're chatting about gratitude, or we're chatting about connection. And I want you to know that I am so grateful for you. If you ever need anything, even if it's at 4 a.m., you can call me. Thank you for being in my life. Speak that into your phone and send it off to someone that you want to know that they are important to you. I'm going to give you a moment to do that. And I'm going to do the same right along with you. And so you're going to hear me. Here we go. This is going to go to, I think it's going to go to DC, y'all. Here we go. I'm giving a talk right now, and we're chatting about connection. I want you to know that I'm so grateful for you. And if you ever need anything, even if it's at 4 a.m., you can call me. Thank you for being in my life. Sent this to my friend Prince. I've never sent that to my friend Prince before, so this will be new for him. All right, y'all. We good? Thank you for indulging me there. And I'm so excited for y'all to be pleasantly surprised. I think like I've been every time that I've sent that away. Okay. Let's step into the next C. This is on care. And so this is really on self-care. We've heard so much about self-care. my hope is to present some ideas that maybe you haven't heard about. So one of the things that was really hard for me is I grew up as a farm kid where there were no days off. And so I always thought about self-care as self-indulgence. It seemed just like it wasn't doing work. And I thought that, that probably didn't have a place. I was absolutely wrong, completely wrong. Here's what I've learned about self-care. Self-care is not self-indulgence, it's maintenance, and it's required. And so I think about self-care now as the same way I think about all of the other tools that are in my world. Like my cell phone is a way that work happens, and I charge it up. I put it on the charger, and I typically don't let it run out of battery. Same with my vehicle. We plug in our vehicles, or maybe we put gas in our vehicles, and you think about all of the tools. A light bulb goes out, we put a light bulb in, right? Because these are tools that we need. And our bodies are the same way, and they have maintenance needs, and self-care is one of them. And so self-care is not self-indulgence, it's maintenance, and it's required. So some ideas around, things that maybe aren't new, that might need permission for, is to unplug. I told you about what I'm going to do for a dinner table. So dinner table is unplug time, to embrace nature. We'll talk about that a little bit too, I think. To listen to a favorite song. Song is so powerful. To declutter. So our minds, our brains are wired to really love colors like greens and blues, right? We know this when we go into when we think about organizations and how they design colors for that healing effect. And it's very purposefully done, because the colors that are most distracting to our brains are grays, and also stuff that is not natural stuff. And so when we declutter, it helps our brains to feel more open, and we can perceive and take in more information. To dance it out. I don't know how many people have dance parties at their house. The dance party is a pretty big deal at our house. Everybody in the family gets to choose a song that they love. And then, we just allow free dance, and it's so much fun. And there's always giggles followed along with that. And then to take a hike. So here's some of the things that I want to share with you. There is this beautiful research right now that's going on around spending time in nature. And in fact, let's take a look. So some of the things that nature can do for us is, of course, it purifies air, we hope. We know in some places that is not the case, or like where I am, fires can happen. But yes, I agree, nature is nurture. It increases calmness when we're spending time in nature. It improves our sleep. It decreases our nervous system irritability. Check this out. And this is specifically or especially when we're spending time in an evergreen forest, that it increases our NK cells, so our immunity and cancer fighting cells. And in some evergreen forests, it might boost them, or can boost them, by 50%. Pretty amazing. So major immunity boost. It decreases our tension, anxiousness, anger, lowers our stress hormone levels, and supports our respiratory system. And I love this. If anybody spends any time at the computer, you might experience what's called prolonged visual display terminal use, which is a very fancy way of saying our brains get tired from looking at the computer too much. And that when we have Siberian fir around, so maybe in case you don't have a Siberian fir in your house, I don't, you can diffuse an essential oil if that suits you. And that when you do that, it decreases that mental fog, that mental fatigue that we can experience from looking at devices for too long, and it doesn't affect our performance. And then Dr. Strayer has done some beautiful work on spending time in nature and found that 4 days of immersion in nature corresponds to, and it has to be disconnected from technology, increases our performance on creativity. Think about how much creativity we need as nurses. Problem solving, need a lot of problem solving, right? By a full 50%. And you don't even have to like nature to get that experience. But what if you don't like nature? That's okay too. You can bring it to you. So having pictures of nature and houseplants have both been shown to decrease our risk of stroke, depression, anger, brain fog, perception of pain, stress. It improves our mood, our healing rates, relaxation, energy, focus, and happiness, just by bringing houseplants and pictures of nature into the home. So many wonderful things around nature. All right, y'all. Compassion. Compassion is purposefully placed at the end for two reasons. One, it is, three reasons. One, it is one of the things that we can do immediately in real time, nearly no matter where we are. The second reason is it is also one that we find to be sometimes most difficult. And the third reason is it is directly linked to, on its own, help reduce burnout. So 3 reasons, I leave it last. This is the regular practice of making yourself your own best friend. So here's some thoughts around how do you make yourself your own best friend? And let's just talk about what that means for a minute. So making myself my own best friend looks like, we'll talk about coffee because I'll tell you that I was an ER nurse, so I love coffee. I didn't drink coffee prior to becoming an ER nurse, but I found this just absolute love for it. And this morning I was drinking a lavender latte. And so if I was having, let's say I had a friend over and they had a coffee and they spilled it, what would I respond as? I would respond with jumping up, let me get you a towel. No problem at all, because I just got this new lavender latte. Let me make you one. It would be amazing. So what a great opportunity to try that. So I would go get them one and it would be so much fun. Hopefully if they like that. But it would be in that really kind, compassionate, right? Meet them exactly where they are. That's how I would talk to them. But is it the way I talk to myself? So if I knock over my own coffee, what might I say? And do I say to myself, of course you knocked over your coffee, Lucy, you talk with your hands all the time. So such a klutz. And if that's the way that I'm talking to myself in that critical way, how do I reframe that critical talk into that compassionate, caring talk, the way I would talk to my best friend? And so just to have some framework around, what might it sound like? And we can do this in the moment. So if we make a mistake or, to forget something on our way to work, or, maybe we forget our badge, or who knows what it is. But are we then being curious with ourselves, like, oh, what just happened? Why did that happen? I wonder what I need right now, as opposed to that critical talk. And so here are some ways that we can practice that. Compassion mantras. Again, these are the things that we might need to hear. Those are simply writing down kind words, right? And so I have a compassion mantra stuck to the side of my bedside table so that when I wake up in the morning, I just see this, this thing that reminds me. And it says, good morning, beautiful. I wanted you to start with a kind word. Have a great day. Super simple, but every time I look at it, I start my day with a smile and it feels really encouraging. So I encourage you to, write one down and practice it in the mirror. This is something that my daddy taught me when I was a little girl. And it was so much fun because, I got to use words that sometimes I didn't get to use, or that I never got to use. But it's putting hands on your hips, having a straight spine, head to the ceiling. And it's looking yourself straight in the eye in the mirror and saying those kind things, whatever it is you need to hear. And so in our house, I practice this. I've got 2 little girls. I practice this with my little girls. We go hands on hips. If I hear them say something that's critical to themselves, hands on hips, they look themselves straight in the eye and say whatever it is they need to hear. I'm beautiful. I'm amazing. I'm strong. I did a great job cleaning my room this morning. I did a great job sharing with my friend this morning. And, whatever it is that they need in that moment. And the same with me, whatever it is I need to hear in that moment. We can create an anthem playlist. And I think we should do that here. We can write ourselves a love letter, y'all. That is something that I've just practiced and is wildly powerful and will make you blush. But it's so powerful. We can make a soul food list, forgive ourselves, and give permission to be, all of ourselves. So soul food list, in case you're curious about what that is, this is just a list of things that you love to do, things that bring you joy, that you feel good about yourself when you're doing them. And so, for me, some of the things that are on my list are walking in the forest, basking in the sun, listening and dancing to fun music, and laughing. And I'm really trying to laugh for no good reason, just uninhibited laughter and allowing myself to just have fun. And those are things that I reach for when I'm not feeling all that great about myself, when I'm really in that critical talk. This is something I practiced last week. I just reached right for that soul food list. And I was like, I think I need 3 things off of here today, and did them. And just not to, it's not that sometimes we don't need to just leave space for those hard things, but to leave space for them when we can meet ourselves with kindness and compassion. So let's try an anthem song. Let me see in the chat what song, and I do want to put a little bit of guardrails around our songs. So I want us to remember our diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. So please, if you please share songs that would that everyone can have belonging with. And so, what song in the chat? Put in the chat is a song that you can reach for when maybe you just kind of aren't feeling all of that, best self, and just really helps to uplift you and feel really amazing. Adele's Easy on Me. We've heard that a lot in our house. Meghan Trainor, yeah, fight song, absolutely flawless. Yes, happy, beautiful, roar, rise up. Y'all, I feel like y'all got a copy of my playlist. Fireworks, yeah, beautiful. And so one of the things I will attempt to do is pull this from the chat. I'll put it into, and sometimes I can't put them all in, but I'll see what themes are in there. We'll put them into an anthem song list, and hopefully be able to make that available where the slide deck is, so that you can have those if you like. Perfect by Pink, you say, yeah, y'all got it. And so having that list can be such a fun way that when we're needing to reach for compassion, you just pull it up in whatever music arena you like to use, and bam, it's right there to support you. So one of my last thoughts around the 4 C's of wellness is that the kindest, most responsible action we can ever take for others, our clients, our families, our groups that we're connected with, is to take great care of ourselves. Now, y'all, I can never leave a group of nurses without sharing just a couple of little bonus practices. So here's a bonus practice. Puppies and kittens. So research has found that looking at pictures of puppies and kittens momentarily focuses our attention and boosts our fine motor dexterity. And that's not my research. That is research that Vanessa Van Edwards had shared in a group that I follow. And I thought, I love that because they're adorable. And sometimes I need that refocus. And so I thought that was super fun. In case you were thinking about like, what could a mantra look like? I wanted to share some of mine. These are the mantras that are all over my house. And I saw that somebody else has different things for their daughters as well. And so knowing that I have a house with daughters and really trying to model the practice, these are some of the things that we see. Grateful to love and to be loved. I choose gratitude today. Grateful for the power to own my own story. And grateful that I have enough and I am enough. So if those can support you, please consider printing one off, putting it in the location where you, feel like you want to hear that or see that message. And then lastly is the Daily Dose Pocket Guide. So often people will say to me, Lucy, this is all great, but honestly, when I leave here, it's really hard for me to remember when things are like, I'm in the thing and it's hard and I'm feeling like my window has shrunk and I don't have a window anymore. And so this was created out of that conversation of, I just need reminders, and y'all, I need them too. And so this is the Daily Dose Pocket Guide. And it was just created from that place of, these are the things that we're striving for, right? To ask our bodies and brains to support us with dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins to, kind of wrap us up in the things where we need that momentary boost. And so some of them can be done in the moment and some of them can't. So sleep, music, meditation, we might, feel like a little irritable and fussy. And so I will tell you, in my irritable, fussy moments, my family now knows to say, grateful for the gift of pause, Lucy. And I will pause. And then I'm going to hug somebody, because that just helps me to have that release of oxytocin and give some love, and then opens my window right back up. And so just all of those different things of, what do y'all need? And, could you find something on this list, and maybe posting it in your car or, on your mirror in the morning or wherever, if that feels right for you, feel free to do that. And then lastly, gratitude is, like I say, it's like the practice that is like the ruler of them all. It is one of the things that gratitude can support your courage, connection, care, and compassion across the spectrum. So if you're thinking, I don't know where to start with all this, that was a lot, I would say start here. So let's practice gratitude jar. Gratitude jar can be a physical thing, or it can be something done virtually. And essentially it is, what's one thing you're grateful for today? Put it in the chat. Let me see your gratitude. And you can do this, like I said, you can set this on your kitchen table with sticky notes and, colored pens if you want to, and folks drop them in when it gets full. In our house, we might have a pizza party. That's, something that we've agreed upon, but you can also do this in your office or virtually, or however, even in text. So yeah, beautiful. I love this. Health and family. Yeah, my boys, my pets, a warm home, my puppy, colleagues. Oh, breath. Yes, beautiful. Thank you. Oh, clean running water. I used to post a little sign for my kiddos on the sink that said, oh my gosh, water just came out of this. Just to help them recognize that doesn't happen everywhere. And we really should, want to be grateful in that moment for that beautiful experience of having running water, having a job I enjoy. Yeah, supportive colleagues, access. Yes, God's protection and love. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your gratitude with me. Beautiful. All right, y'all. Let me see in the chat, what is one practice that you've heard or that you're thinking about that you might want to commit to? Let me see what our success looked like today. Put into the chat a commitment to a practice that you're willing to try. Walk in nature, self-compassion, reaching out to connections. Yeah, outdoor gratitude jar, self-care. Ah, guilt-free time for me. Yes, beautiful. Give permission. Writing more text to more friends. Thank you. So wonderful. Lastly, what I want to share is my gratitude for you. Like I told you, this is my purpose. And so getting to be here with you and sharing this is such an honor to my heart and my soul. And I appreciate you so much. I'm so grateful for our time together. Thank you.
Great. Lucy, and thank you to you. I think for so many people, our work and our lives are filled with other C words: chaos, complexity, uncertainty, lack of control. Yet today you have brought us some new C words: connection, caring. And when you talked about compassion, when you were going through all of the other points, I was getting chills with everything you would say. And then I'm a researcher. I was excited that you were sharing the evidence, telling us that this matters. People have studied this. This makes sense. These are not, as you said, self-indulgent acts. They actually, if we adopt these strategies, can change our health and how we feel and mitigate so much of the trauma that many people have experienced during the pandemic. So I was getting chills. And then when you got to your last slide on compassion, I was sitting here crying, and I don't know why, but I know what it was, is that you have it touched me at a place that I hadn't felt in a while. And then as I saw the comments, I just am so grateful for you for coming on a Monday morning. And I forgot to say, Lucy is in Oregon. So she started with us this morning at 6 a.m. And thank you. So I'm so grateful for you sharing your joy and your love and connecting with all of us. And I'm surprised, and I'm not surprised. I love the text, the gratitude activity. So I sent it out to 3 people and have already received 3 responses, including from a friend who's in BC, who's also awake. I received some from my public health nursing friends on here, and thank you to those of you who are my public health nursing friends who sent those. And it felt so great to send, and then even more wonderful to hear from others or to receive those texts, to know that my circle of people, I can call it 3 a.m. and I'm in menopause, so I'm always awake at 3 a.m. anyway, so love the 3 a.m. support group. So thank you, Lucy. So we do have a few minutes, and there is the question and answer pod. And so please, if any of you have questions, please put it into the Q&A pod. I know in the chat there had been an earlier question. Someone had asked about, I think it was the book by Seligman, Loneliness Connection. I probably can't find it in the chat, but does that ring a bell, Lucy?
Oh, I think I was talking about Dr. Martin Seligman's research out of the University of Pennsylvania. Yeah, so in case they wanted to look that up.
Okay, perfect.
I'll put it into the chat.
Excellent, thank you. And and another request. Do you have a recommendation on a book by Kristen Neff?
I don't know that I do on a book per se, yet I do find that I spend a decent amount of time on her website. And she has, and so gracious, such a just a beautiful example of the practice. She has developed a tool based on her research that you can take, and it is free. On her, and I have to look up and see what her site is.
But I can add it. I'll add it in the chat. I think it's the self-compassion.
Self-compassion, yeah. And so you can, get a sense of where are you, and it can help give some guidance around how then to support yourself in that.
Great, thanks. And Alita, thank you for asking that. And we put the website into the chat. Jody Shepard, who is an amazing public health nurse at Middlesex London Health Unit, is asking, Lucy, what's your favorite song? What's the top of your anthem list today?
So I will tell you, my anthem list shuffles for whatever the need is in the day. But I have a practice when I start my morning and I'm going to do a talk. Demi Lovato tends to come up on my list, and often Confident is because y'all, I love being here and I still get very nervous. So that is a power song I reach for.
I'm just going to jump in here because I think that you did mention a book, and just to clarify, was it Together by Vivek Murthy?
Together, yes.
Okay. Thank you to Lindsay for putting that in the chat pod.
Yes. And let me put his name into the chat. That book just was, I started to read it in the middle of the pandemic. It actually might have been at the very beginning. And it just was so impactful for me to hear. And it wasn't written for that reason. It was already work that he had been doing. It just happened to come at that very at that moment where I guess it's what I needed in that moment was to hear that research. There we go. And so he wasn't at the time, but now he is the Surgeon General for the United States.
Great. And there was a request in the chat for how to contact Lucy. So Lucy, I've provided your public website for your Wild Roots organization. And so Lucy's information is available there. And as well, this webinar will be archived. So I know we have a question that, of course, it's a Monday morning and it's busy, and many of our colleagues and the teams were not able to attend. So there will be a link to this website, to this presentation. We'll have it archived. We'll also have the link on our PHN-PREP website, and we'll send out the information and the link as well to all the HBHC and NFP managers across the country. And Lucy already alluded it to right after this presentation. We have a companion guide. Thank you, Lucy, with again, so many more of your beautiful visuals. A companion guide that we will send out to the supervisors and managers of the Healthy Babies, Healthy Children and Nurse Family Partnership teams of activities to build on these 4 C's that you can use in one-on-one supervision or your team meetings, or share with your teams for their own individual self-practice. So stay tuned, more to come. And Andrea asked, how did you actually come up with your amazing visuals? And just saying, she's so glad that you did.
Thank you for asking that question. So I chose them very deliberately and from a site called Unsplash. And so Unsplash is all kinds of photography artists in the world who, express their art, and then they make them publicly available for free to anyone. And so anyone can go on there and look through all of the beautiful art that is there. The reason that I selected each one, and I try to be very deliberate in thinking about what is this communicating, what's needed here. And you might notice that nearly all of them are from nature, because the evidence around nature is so profound that I think, in my mind, and somebody had shared a story with me one time that not everybody likes nature, Lucy. And I think that's true. I think for me, it's so hard to imagine, but even if we don't, just looking at it provides this boost of wellness. And so my thought is if nothing else strikes anyone, I want what I offer visually to be able to support your wellness as well. So in just seeing the slides, they are intended to also support our wellness.
Great. Thanks, Lucy. Lindsay Croswell, who's actually our nursing practice lead for the Nurse Family Partnership across Ontario, is asking, do you have any podcast recommendations? And I think as nurses continue to, and many are returning, and family home visitors to in-person or outdoor home visits, we spend a lot of time in our cars. And podcasts are great for when we're traveling. So any podcast recommendations?
Thank you, Lindsay. I will tell you, I had not ever made a podcast list. But I've recently been asked, and so I've been thinking around that as well. And I would say the one that I can recommend, because I personally listened to each of them and have vetted them and really truly believe in the work, is Unlocking Us. And that is Dr. Brené Brown's podcast. It's one of her podcasts. I think she also has a Dare to Lead podcast, but Unlocking Us has been one of the things that I will reach for when I really want to, hear around the subject and also have my soul fed.
Great, thank you. And in the chat, I put another podcast that just came out. Many of you may have been a part of it, and it is called Stories from the Field. And it is a podcast of nurses who work in preventative health care. The moderators of the podcast are Susan Blue and Maureen Cava, who many of you will know who have retired, but who worked in public health at Toronto Public Health, I think at Peel, probably a few others. And they're really passionate about public health and the different facets of public health nursing. It was an amazing podcast. The very first episode, I think the first voice that we hear is one of our own chief nursing officers, Heather Loco from Middlesex London Health Unit. So it's another great podcast. So many to hear. Great. Okay. Another, and I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so this is an important last question. Especially given what you talked about, the importance of an organization. And I think a lot of what you shared today highlighted that we can't just give pizza parties and tell people to do yoga, right? Like we need to move beyond that, and that the roots of burnout are often in the organizational issues. And you even mentioned, too many administrative burden of too many EMRs or documenting systems. So given that context, the question is, how would you suggest that you bring these ideas and activity to teams throughout an organization?
So I just want to make sure that I understand clearly. We're talking about bringing the things that we've talked about here forward.
Yes.
So I think that's a wonderful question. It's something I've been thinking so much about recently as new data keeps emerging. And for me, I do mixed methods, but my love is with qualitative research and hearing stories and understanding from personal perspective. And so the stories that I've been hearing lately are this sensitivity to just talking about our well-being, right? That as if burnout will go away if we all just do these things. And that's just not true. These are things that I put together because when I was having my own experience around burnout, I couldn't wait for the organization to be able to address systems design issues. And I had to just get started for myself. And I think just being really transparent about that and acknowledging just the same way that, I was acknowledging here that burnout is an occupational syndrome, that it comes from chronic workplace stress due to an imbalance in workload versus resources. And workload is not just meant like what's on your plate, but the inefficiencies, the red tape, the whatever, how many systems you need to chart in to get that taken care of, and do you have all the resources that you need to get your clients the care that they need, right? How hard are you having to work to do those kinds of things? And so acknowledging, we recognize that that's where it's coming from. And so it's a very human, natural response for anyone. And I think to really recognize that anyone who experiences burnout, that is not like something's not wrong. something's very right. Your body and brain and mind are doing exactly what they're designed to do. And it is an acknowledgement to our organizations to do something different. And I think just being open and transparent about that, with the acknowledgement that we recognize that not everybody here can wait. And so here's some ways to get started while we're addressing with the organization the need to do this.
Great. Super. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for these words of wisdom. So appreciate you sharing all of this with us today. And so really, as we wrap up today's session, I'm just from the bottom of my heart, Lucy, thank you for getting up early. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for presenting. I would also like to thank all of you for starting your week with us and for joining us with today's session. It's really great to see such a strong virtual participation, knowing that you're doing a lot of work time on your computers. And you can expect to receive a brief and anonymous survey for today's session. And we really appreciate if you can quickly complete the brief survey, because it will really help us to inform and develop future webinars for this series. And as we mentioned, we will be circulating to the HBHC and NFP managers and supervisors the tips for leaders, the companion guide of activities to complement the content from today's presentation. And then just to share a few other, I'm gonna try and share my screen again. Does that look right? Is that you don't see my? Okay, good. And also, and many of you, we just like to encourage all of you to continue to connect with the Public Health Nursing Practice Research and Education Program. We are working closely with the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services. And one of our missions is to develop practice resources and educational resources specifically designed to support home visitation programs. And as the needs come in from the different health units, we work with our leadership team, our advisory board of public health nurses and managers to develop resources to meet your needs. There's different ways you can connect with us. We're trying to up our social media game so that you can find us. And at the beginning of the pandemic, one of the needs that we heard from across the HBHC teams was we feel disconnected and we need more ways to feel connected, not only within our own health units, but across the province. And what we learned is that nurses and family home visitors and supervisors in all the HBHC and NFP programs across the province have the same needs and the same questions. So with the support of Mac Health on the Mac Health platform, we have developed a virtual community of practice. And so I put up this slide here, encourage you to go to Mac Health, find it's called the PHN-PREP logo, get yourself registered. You can contact us if you need some more guidance on actually how to register. It's fairly easy to find. And it's our hope to create a really interactive community of practice where public health nurses can post questions, and all of you are the experts in your field. You can help answer them for each other. We will also be using this as a space to also share all of our resources and archive them. And then lastly, next month, oh my goodness, January in 2022, we'll have our second webinar. Registration for this one will open up again. And Jan Ferrance, who's also coming from, who will be coming from BC, so who will also have an early morning start, is going to come and speak to us about the neurobiology of trauma and attachment and substance use. And just like Lucy did today, we've asked her to come with ideas on very practical strategies of how you can embed these ideas in your work with families. And with that note, we do this work for families. And Lucy, so much of what you shared today, we can integrate into our parallel process. I can see managers and supervisors using many of these strategies with public health nurses, family home visitors. And then for family home visitors and public health nurses, when you work with your families, I just love that idea of having a gratitude jar, or doing affirmations with them, and teaching them also how to forgive and to be self-compassionate and how to connect with others. how to connect with nature. We've heard so many public health nurses doing outdoor walking visits. And today, Lucy, you've presented us with the science of how beneficial and healthy that is. So on that note, thank you. Thank you to all of you, and wishing.
I just want to say thank you, Susan. Thank you for bringing Lucy to this group and to everyone on the call. I'm actually, for the first time, quite speechless about what I just witnessed. So thank you both so much.
Great. Thank you all. Have a wonderful Monday. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much.